mathematicians. Today we're going to be learning about fractions and decimals, more specifically about number lines counting by fourths. To get us started, here we have a number line, and notice that in between 0 and 1, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. In between 1 and 2, we also have 4 spaces, and in between 2 and 3, we also have 4 spaces. That means it takes 4 spaces in between each whole number to make a whole. So, if it takes 4 spaces to make a whole, that means we're going to be counting up by fourths. So, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, and notice that 4/4 is directly above 1, and that's because 4/4 is equivalent to 1 whole. And then we have 5/4, which is an improper fraction that can be written as 1 and 1/4. Then we have 6/4, which is an improper fraction that can be written as 1 and 2/4. Yes, that can be simplified, but we're just going to leave it as 2/4 for now. Then we have 7/4, which can be written as 1 and 3/4. Then we have 8/4, which simplifies to 2. Then we have 9/4, which is an improper fraction that can be written as 2 and 1/4. Then we have 10/4, which is an improper fraction that can be written as 2 and 2/4. Then we have 11/4, which is an improper fraction that can be written as 2 and 3/4. And then we have 12/4, which is an improper fraction that can be written as 3. Now, we've taken all our improper fractions and written them as either a mixed number or a whole number, so we don't actually need these here. So our number line represents our fractions, our whole numbers, and our mixed numbers counting up by fourths. So here we have a vertical number line. And notice that for our vertical number line, we also have 4 spaces in between each whole number. So that means that our number line is counting up by fourths. The only difference here is that it's vertical. So we have 0 and then 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. We have 1 whole, 1 and 1/4, 1 and 2/4, 1 and 3/4, 2, 2 and 1/4, 2 and 2/4, 2 and 3/4, and 3. So let's take our number line, and now we're going to take our fractions and write them as decimals. So if we start off with 1/4, in order to convert 1/4 into a decimal, we have to divide the numerator divided by the denominator. So 1 divided by 4, where 1 is our dividend and 4 is our divisor. Then we ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 1? Well, it doesn't, so we're going to put a 0 on top. So because 4 doesn't go into 1, we're going to add a decimal point after the 1, and then add a 0, so we could find the decimal equivalent to 1/4. Make sure you bring up the decimal, and then we're going to ignore the decimal point for right now and ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 10? Well, 4 goes into 10 2 times, and that's because 4 times 2 is equal to 8. So we're going to put the 8 there, and then we're going to subtract. 10 minus 8 is equal to 2. So because we still have a remainder, let's add another 0 and then see what happens. So we bring that down and we ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 20? Well, 4 goes into 20 5 times, and that's because 4 times 5 is equal to 20. So we're going to write the 20 below and then subtract. 20 minus 20 is 0. So we have no remainder. That means that 1/4 is equivalent to 25/100. So right above 1/4, we could go ahead and write 25/100. So now that we have the decimal equivalent to 1/4, let's find the decimal equivalent to 2/4. And again, we're going to divide the numerator divided by the denominator. So 2 divided by 4, where 2 is going to be our dividend and 4 is going to be our divisor. We ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 2? Well, 4 does not go into 2, so we're going to add a 0 up here. And then after the 2, we're going to add a decimal point and a 0. Make sure that you bring up the decimal point when we do this, and then we ignore the decimal point and ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 20? Well, 4 goes into 20 5 times, and that's because 4 times 5 is equal to 20. We're going to go ahead and write our 20 here, and then we're going to subtract. 20 minus 20 is equal to 0, so we have no remainder, so that means that 2/4 is equal to 5/10. So now that we have the decimal equivalent to 2/4, let's go ahead and find the decimal equivalent to 3/4. And again, we're going to divide the numerator divided by the denominator, so 3 divided by 4, where 3 is our dividend and 4 is our divisor. We ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 3? Well, 4 does not go into 3, so we're going to put a 0 on top, then add a decimal point after the 3, and add a 0. We're going to make sure we bring up that decimal point, and then ask yourselves, how many times does 4 go into 30? Well, 4 goes into 30 7 times, and that's because 4 times 7 is equal to 28, and that's as close as we could get without going over. So we're going to go ahead and write the 28, and then we're going to subtract. 30 minus 28 is equal to 2, so we have a remainder, so let's add another 0. So now we have 20, and we ask ourselves, how many times does 4 go into 20? Well, 4 goes into 20 5 times, and that's because 4 times 5 is equal to 20. We're going to go ahead and write the 20 below, and then subtract. 20 minus 20 is equal to 0, so 3/4 is equal to 7/500. So now that we have the decimal equivalent for 1/4, 2/4, and 3/4, notice that there's a pattern. We're increasing by 2500ths. We can add a 0 after the 5/10ths to show 25, 50, 75. However, 5/10ths and 50/100ths are equivalent to each other. So if we add another 2500ths to 7500ths, we get 1. If we add another 2500ths, we get 1 and 2500ths. If we add another one, we get 1 and 5/10ths. If we add it again, we get 1 and 7500ths. If we add it again, we get 2. If we add it again, we get 2 and 2500ths. If we add it again, we get 2 and 5/10ths. If we add it again, we get 2 and 7500ths. And then if we add it one more time, we get 3. So notice that if we have 1/4, that's 2500ths, but 1 and 1/4 is 1 and 2500ths. And then 2 and 1/4 is 2 and 2500ths. So there's definitely a pattern here. Even though we have a mixed number, the decimal is going to be the same for 1/4, 2/4, and 3/4, despite it having a whole number in front of it or not. So here we have a vertical number line, and if we're counting up by the decimal equivalents to 1/4, we're going to have 0, then 2500ths, 5/10ths, 7500ths, 1, then 1 and 2500ths, 1 and 5/10ths, 1 and 7500ths, 2, 2 and 2500ths, 2 and 5/10ths, 2 and 7500ths, and then 3. So that's it for number lines counting by fourths.